I thought I had it all until one photo exposed my cheating husband with his ex. I didn't confront him. I stayed silent. I recorded everything. While he betrayed me in our home, I gathered proof. When the time was right, I exposed them both, publicly, legally, completely. He lost everything. She lost her marriage. And I walked away with dignity and emotional justice. He came crawling back, but I was already free. This isn't just a divorce story. It's about silent revenge, betrayal, and reclaiming my power. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of personal growth and empowerment. My name is Kate Harper. At 35, I had built a life most people dream of. A thriving interior design firm, a spacious home in Chicago's quiet suburbs, and a husband who seemed almost too good to be true. James was 38, confident, charismatic, a successful business executive admired by everyone around us. Our marriage had always appeared flawless from the outside, envied by friends and praised by family. Even I had convinced myself it was perfect. But beneath the polished surface, something had subtly shifted over the past year. Conversations had grown shorter, evenings together quieter, his once affectionate gestures now mechanical. At first, I attributed it to stress at work or just the natural progression of long-term relationships. After 10 years of marriage, it seemed reasonable for passion to mellow into something calmer. It was only when I was away from home during a 2-week business trip to New York that reality finally caught up with me. I had been invited to oversee a major hotel renovation project, one of the biggest contracts of my career. Initially, I welcomed the distraction. The bustling energy of the city, endless client meetings, and creative brainstorming sessions allowed me to briefly forget the nagging doubt I'd been carrying about my marriage. Then, near the end of my trip, everything unraveled. Late one night, exhausted and alone in my hotel room, my phone lit up with an unexpected message. Sarah, a friend from my college days whom I hadn't spoken to in years, had sent me something. I hesitated before opening it, my pulse quickening as I read her brief note. Kate, I hate to be the one sending this, but you deserve to know. Attached was a photo-clear, undeniable proof. My breath stopped. My heart plummeted. There was James, my husband, smiling warmly and intimately at Caf Lumiere, our favorite spot with Lauren, his ex-girlfriend. The photo was dated 2 years ago, when our marriage had seemed so stable, so secure. I stared at the image for what felt like an eternity, my mind spinning with disbelief and confusion. My hands shook as the reality sank in. James had been lying to me, not just recently, but for years. Lauren wasn't merely a figure from his past. She was very much part of our present. I sat silently, the faint sounds of New York City traffic drifting up from the street below, accentuating the emptiness around me. How could I have missed this? Was I that blind, that naive? Every assurance James had ever given me now felt hollow and cruel. Sleep eluded me entirely that night. Instead, I paced restlessly, questioning everything. Our supposedly perfect marriage unraveled before my eyes, exposing truths I'd long ignored. I thought about calling James immediately, confronting him head-on, but I quickly realized it would be pointless. James was smart, persuasive. He'd deny it, offer smooth explanations, make me doubt my instincts all over again. No, confrontation without proof would get me nowhere. For the first time, I felt a calm resolve wash over my confusion and pain. If I was going to confront James, it would be on my terms, with undeniable evidence in hand. I had spent years silently accepting his distant behavior, believing excuses that grew increasingly thin. But now, the betrayal captured in that photograph ignited something inside me, a determination to reclaim control over my own story. As dawn filtered through the curtains, casting soft golden light across the city, I recognized a shift within myself. The woman who had boarded the plane 2 weeks ago was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer-eyed, ready to face the painful truth no matter the cost. I knew exactly what I had to do next: return home quietly, watch carefully, and gather proof. Only then could I break free, reclaim my dignity, and begin again. The false happiness I'd clung to was gone forever. But perhaps that was exactly what I needed to finally find myself. Returning home from New York was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. The photograph Sarah sent had awakened something inside me, a painful clarity that made each step heavier as I entered the place I'd called home for a decade. Everything looked the same: the tasteful furniture, the soft lighting, the photos of our life together. But now, nothing felt genuine. It was as though I'd stepped onto a carefully constructed movie set, built specifically to deceive me. James greeted me at the door, as polished as ever, dressed impeccably in his tailored suit. He offered a practiced smile, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Welcome back, Kate. How was the trip?" I forced myself to smile, my lips stiff. "Productive," I answered quietly, studying his eyes for any hint of guilt or hesitation. But James was smooth, almost too smooth. His expression never faltered. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing. I kept replaying the photograph in my mind, remembering clearly the date stamped on it. 2 years ago. I thought back to that time, desperately searching my memories for clues. Had there been signs? Had I simply chosen to ignore them? A sinking feeling confirmed what I feared. I had always known, somewhere deep within, that our marriage wasn't perfect. But I'd buried that truth under layers of denial and false optimism. In the days that followed, I didn't confront James directly. Instead, I became more observant, taking mental notes of his behavior's small details I'd overlooked before, now glaringly obvious. He was careful with his phone, frequently stepping outside to take calls. He'd smile gently when questioned, always calm, always reassuring. But behind that polished veneer, I now saw a careful manipulation one I'd willingly accepted for years. One evening after dinner, as we sat together in strained silence, I finally spoke, testing the waters. "James, have you talked to Lauren recently?" His eyes flickered briefly, just long enough to reveal surprise, before he quickly regained composure. "Lauren?" he echoed, feigning confusion. "Why would I talk to her?" I paused, holding his gaze calmly. "I don't know. Just asking." He smiled, perfectly calm again. "Of course not. She's ancient history." That blatant lie felt like a sharp blade slicing through my remaining illusions. Yet instead of anger, a strange calm washed over me. His dishonesty didn't shock me anymore. It solidified my determination. That weekend, I deliberately extended my hours at work. If James believed I was busy and inattentive, he'd inevitably slip up again. On Saturday evening, under the pretense of preparing a new client presentation, I quietly installed a hidden camera high above the living room bookshelf. My hands trembled slightly as I positioned it, fully aware of the line I was crossing. But James had forced me into this corner. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming myself. I spent the following evenings reviewing the camera's recordings in secret. The first few nights revealed nothing unusual, just James alone, reading, making calls, and watching television. But patience paid off. On the third evening of footage review, my pulse quickened painfully. James appeared on screen, casually welcoming Lauren into our home as though she belonged there. She stepped inside, graceful and confident, settling comfortably onto our sofa. My heart clenched as James poured wine for them both, laughing softly, whispering something intimate that made Lauren lean closer. Anger burned through me, swift and sharp, but I forced myself to keep watching, allowing the harsh truth to fully sink in. It hurt profoundly, yet beneath the pain grew a steady determination. In that moment, the woman I'd once been, the trusting, accommodating Kate who quietly accepted whatever James chose to offer, faded away entirely. I realized this wasn't about salvaging a marriage that had long since crumbled. This was about freeing myself, breaking away from the chains of deceit I'd allowed James to wrap around me. I clicked pause, the image freezing at James's smile and Lauren's laughter. As painful as it was to see, it ignited a resolve within me. The truth, harsh and undeniable, had become my ally. I finally saw my path clearly, not revenge born of bitterness, but justice born of self-respect. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Piece by piece, I'd gather undeniable proof, careful and methodical, until my freedom was no longer just a distant hope, but an inevitable reality. In the weeks that followed, my life transformed into a delicate balancing act, woven intricately between silent observation and purposeful absence. Every morning, as I left for work, I carefully composed my expression, calm, detached, unchanged. Behind that facade, though, my mind never stopped working, cataloging each subtle glance, each hushed phone call James attempted to hide from me. I became adept at living in two worlds: the serene, outwardly happy life I portrayed, and the sharp, methodical world of hidden cameras, timestamps, and meticulously gathered proof. James remained blissfully unaware. To him, my increased hours at the office and sudden weekend trips seemed ordinary, merely the demands of a growing business. In reality, each carefully orchestrated absence was another opportunity for James to become careless, to let down his guard, and reveal the depths of his betrayal. One evening, after returning from yet another fabricated client meeting, I sat alone in my study, reviewing footage from the discreet camera I'd placed above our bookshelf. My heart clenched as I watched James welcoming Lauren again into our home this time, the scene playing out even more clearly. She removed her coat with a familiarity that cut deep, casually draping it over the chair I'd chosen years ago during our first anniversary trip. James handed her a glass of wine, his movements relaxed, confident, disturbingly intimate. Pain threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to stay calm, to watch the footage objectively. This wasn't merely proof, it was liberation. Every frame confirmed what my heart already knew. Our marriage was irrevocably broken, and James had long ceased to respect our vows. The Kate who once might have cried, begged, or blamed herself for failing her marriage no longer existed. Instead, the woman who watched calmly from behind the screen had begun to reclaim her dignity piece by piece from the wreckage of betrayal. That night, I saved the recordings meticulously, time-stamped each critical moment, and organized the evidence into a secure, private folder. In doing so, I recognized the woman I'd become, determined, strategic, and resolute. Yet beneath my resolve lay a deeper, quieter ache, the painful recognition of wasted years, of love carelessly discarded, and a life built upon illusion. In the solitude of my office, memories returned uninvited. I recalled the early years, our whispered promises in moonlit rooms, the shared laughter echoing through our first tiny apartment, and the innocent trust I'd placed in James from the start. Each memory stung, but it also hardened my resolve. It reminded me precisely why I could not falter now. The next day, over breakfast, I deliberately mentioned an upcoming 3-day business trip. James barely looked up from his coffee, murmuring something vague about how busy we both were lately. Yes, I agreed softly, meeting his gaze briefly, unafraid now. It seems we've both had a lot on our plates. He hesitated, perhaps sensing something beneath my calm words, but quickly returned to his usual indifference. It'll be good for us, some time apart, to catch up on work. I nodded slowly, a gentle smile masking the truth behind my eyes. You're right, I whispered quietly, though the words held a meaning deeper than he would ever comprehend. Time apart will do us both good. As I stood, gathering my belongings for another carefully orchestrated departure, I felt no bitterness, only clarity. Each step away from our shared illusion brought me closer to the freedom I'd long denied myself. James believed himself clever, untouchable even. But soon he would learn that silence was not weakness, and quiet observation could prove far more powerful than confrontation. With one final glance back, I left our home, not with the resignation of a victim, but with the quiet confidence of a woman who'd begun to rewrite her own story. As days turned into weeks, I meticulously documented each piece of evidence. My life had become a careful choreography of subtle manipulation and quiet observation. Each fabricated business trip, each late evening spent alone in my office was purposefully planned to grant James the illusion of safety, and each time he took advantage of my absence, it reinforced my decision, bringing clarity rather than pain. One evening, while James attended a corporate dinner, I sat alone in the dimly lit study, carefully reviewing the latest footage. My heart no longer raced with shock when I saw Lauren stepping confidently into our home, casually removing her coat, her presence comfortable and familiar. Instead, I calmly time-stamped the scenes, intimate laughter shared on the sofa, whispered conversations in our kitchen, stolen embraces in the hallway. Painful as these images were, they represented my freedom, piece by undeniable piece. Yet, despite my growing resilience, I couldn't fully suppress the quiet ache within me. Watching James behave so affectionately toward Lauren, effortlessly sharing the same intimacy he had once reserved for me alone, brought back moments I'd long buried. Memories flooded my mind. Our first Christmas together, whispered promises in front of the fireplace, his careful attentiveness when I'd fallen ill during a harsh Chicago winter. The contrast between then and now was stark, almost cruel. Yet I forced myself to remain detached, focusing instead on what I knew must come next. In the days following, I became more strategic. I deliberately booked another weekend away, this time at a design convention in Boston. Before leaving, I casually reminded James of my trip over breakfast. "I'll be away again this weekend," I mentioned lightly, feigning mild exhaustion. "Sorry I've been traveling so often lately." James barely looked up from his newspaper. "It's fine. Work is work." His casual dismissal stung, yet confirmed what I already knew. To James, my absence had ceased to be noteworthy, a fact he embraced without hesitation. Arriving at my Boston hotel, I meticulously checked my surveillance app. Sure enough, James wasted little time. Lauren appeared at our door that very evening. Only this time, as I watched, my heart didn't falter. I observed them quietly, carefully noting every incriminating detail. This weekend provided some of the clearest evidence yet, undeniable, unequivocal proof of James's betrayal. As the days passed, I started preparing for the inevitable confrontation. I contacted my attorney, discreetly outlining the situation. "Kate," she'd advised calmly during our private consultation, "the more comprehensive and undeniable your evidence, the stronger your position will be." Those words resonated deeply within me, fueling my determination. With every additional piece of footage, every carefully logged timestamp, I strengthened my resolve and reinforced my growing confidence. The woman James once knew, trusting, forgiving, easily deceived, was slipping further into the past with each passing day. Returning home that Sunday evening, I made sure my expression gave nothing away. James was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, something he'd rarely done before, clearly an attempt to appear thoughtful. "Welcome back," he said with practiced charm. "How was Boston?" "Busy, as usual," I replied calmly, my voice steady. I watched him carefully, noticing the slight flicker of guilt behind his practiced smile. Or perhaps it was merely my imagination. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Soon enough, pretenses would no longer be necessary. That night, alone in my study, I carefully organized all the evidence into a clear, methodical narrative. Watching the footage once more, I felt an odd sense of detachment. The couple on screen, my husband and another woman, had become strangers to me. I was no longer Kate, the deceived wife. I was Kate Harper, the woman preparing methodically, intelligently, and unemotionally to reclaim her life. Closing my laptop, I sat in the quiet stillness of my study. For the first time in weeks, I breathed deeply, fully aware of the clarity I'd gained. The truth I'd so carefully gathered would soon set me free. As the evidence mounted, I found myself reflecting quietly on the journey that brought me here. Late evenings alone in my study became moments of quiet introspection, each time-stamped clip reinforcing the truth I'd long avoided. This wasn't simply about James's betrayal anymore. It was about rediscovering myself, reclaiming the strength I'd surrendered long ago. One rainy evening, while James attended another ambiguous late-night meeting, I sat silently flipping through our wedding album. Each photograph, his gentle smile, my hopeful eyes, reminded me of promises now painfully hollow. How had that hopeful woman faded away, replaced by someone willing to overlook every warning sign? I thought back to the earliest days of our marriage, full of optimism, warmth, and whispered dreams. James had been attentive then, deeply caring. But over time, I'd compromised my own dreams and ambitions, placing his happiness above mine, believing it was the foundation of lasting love. Yet the more I yielded, the less James seemed to notice or care. Now, confronting the truth was difficult, but also liberating. Each painful video clip wasn't merely proof of his betrayal. It was a mirror, reflecting the woman I'd allowed myself to become. Facing this truth wasn't weakening. Instead, it was empowering. During an appointment with my attorney, Amanda quietly studied the evidence I'd gathered. She paused, looking at me with genuine respect. "Kate, most people would crumble under this. Your composure and clarity are impressive." Her words resonated deeply, confirming something I'd begun to feel myself. I was stronger than I'd realized. Walking out of her office, I felt a growing confidence, a quiet but profound shift inside me. The real turning point came unexpectedly one evening as I reviewed the footage. After Lauren had left, James sat alone, visibly upset, restless, and unhappy. Surprisingly, I felt no anger, only pity. James wasn't betraying me because of anything lacking in myself. His emptiness wasn't my failure, it was his own. This realization changed everything. It freed me from bitterness, shifting my focus inward, where true healing could begin. I'd spent years defining myself by my marriage, measuring my worth through James's approval. Now, clarity emerged. My value had never depended upon him. I'd allowed myself to become a secondary character in my own life, accepting whatever attention he offered. But that woman no longer existed. Slowly closing the laptop, I took a deep breath, feeling genuinely free for the first time in years. James's betrayal had hurt deeply, but it had also sparked my awakening. I was no longer defined by our broken marriage. Instead, I was beginning to reclaim the woman I'd left behind. In the quiet of my study that night, peace settled gently around me. The future stretched ahead, uncertain yet inviting. Whatever came next, I would meet it with strength, dignity, and self-respect values I'd finally reclaimed from the wreckage of betrayal. The morning sunlight streamed gently through the window of my attorney's sleek office, illuminating the neat stack of documents carefully arranged before us. Each sheet of paper represented months of quiet resilience, meticulous planning, and patient endurance. For the first time, my heart was calm, untroubled by doubt or hesitation. "I've reviewed everything carefully, Kate," my lawyer, Amanda Collins, said softly, her eyes steady and supportive. "This evidence is comprehensive, airtight. James will have no choice but to accept your terms." I took a slow, deep breath, absorbing her words. "Then let's proceed." The legal process began quietly, without fanfare or warning. James remained blissfully unaware, continuing his carefully choreographed life of deceit, while I methodically dismantled it behind closed doors. Amanda had advised discretion, timing our move carefully to prevent any opportunity for him to counterattack. Finally, on a crisp autumn afternoon, James arrived home to find an envelope prominently placed on the dining table. I watched silently from the staircase as he opened it, confusion creasing his brow, slowly turning to shock as he skimmed the detailed pages within, pages filled with undeniable proof of his betrayal. "What is this?" His voice trembled, anger and panic mingling. I stepped quietly down the stairs, composed and unafraid, meeting his eyes steadily. "Exactly what it appears to be, James. A petition for divorce, alongside documented evidence of your affair." He stared at me, speechless, searching desperately for excuses that no longer existed. "Kate, let me explain." I raised my hand calmly, silencing him gently. "You don't need to explain. Your actions speak louder than any words possibly could. I trusted you, James. I loved you. And you repaid that trust by inviting another woman into our home, into our lives." He took a shaky breath, trying one last futile attempt to recover control. "You don't understand. It was—" "No," I interrupted gently, firmly. "I understand perfectly. And so does everyone else." His eyes widened in sudden realization. "What do you mean, everyone else?" "I've shared copies of this evidence with our family, friends, and your colleagues," I answered quietly, steadily. They deserve to know who you truly are." The color drained from his face, his confident demeanor finally crumbling completely. He sank slowly into the nearest chair, defeated. For a brief moment, I felt pity. Not for him, but for the wasted years and false promises. Yet pity was fleeting, quickly replaced by the steady assurance that justice was finally unfolding. In the weeks following, the process moved swiftly. James initially attempted to contest the terms, but faced with the comprehensive evidence I'd gathered, his options quickly evaporated. The undeniable clarity of each time-stamped photo and video removed any leverage he might have had. The man who once prided himself on control, power, and reputation now stood exposed, stripped of his carefully constructed faade. The court hearing was brief, dignified. I watched James closely as the judge pronounced our marriage officially dissolved, granting me favorable terms due to the clear evidence of his infidelity. James stood silently, humbled, unable to dispute the facts laid bare before him. He would leave our marriage exactly as he'd entered it, empty-handed, humbled, and alone. Leaving the courthouse that day, I felt strangely weightless. The air seemed clearer, the sunlight brighter. For the first time in years, the future stretched out before me, unburdened by deceit or obligation. Walking down those steps, I realized I'd finally reclaimed the one thing I'd unknowingly surrendered for so long, myself. Freedom had come not through revenge or bitterness, but through quiet strength and unwavering determination. James's betrayal had once threatened to break me, but ultimately, it had awakened the strongest parts of myself. As I stepped into the sunlight, feeling its warmth gently on my face, I smiled softly, finally ready to embrace the new beginning, waiting patiently ahead. After the divorce became final, I deliberately distanced myself from the echoes of my former life. Occasionally, mutual acquaintances shared snippets about James and Lauren's new marriage, their hastily built union beginning amidst scandal and whispers. Initially, I felt a faint curiosity, but soon even that faded away, replaced by indifference. One evening, Sarah, who had become a trusted friend through this ordeal, called to check on me. "Did you hear? James and Lauren, they're not doing well," she offered hesitantly. "Apparently they fight constantly. Everyone sees it." I took a deep breath, reflecting carefully on her words before responding. "Sarah, it doesn't matter to me anymore. Whatever happens between them isn't my story to follow." She hesitated briefly, then softened. "You're right, Kate. I just wanted you to know." "I appreciate it," I said gently. "But their troubles no longer affect my life." As days became weeks, I began reclaiming parts of myself I'd neglected for years. I traveled, discovering cities I'd always dreamed of visiting. Alone but never lonely, I filled my days with art galleries, quiet cafes, and sunsets witnessed without needing anyone's approval or company. I reconnected with old friends, those I'd unintentionally distanced myself from during my marriage. With each conversation, laughter returned effortlessly, rebuilding bonds that felt authentic and nourishing. Slowly, I rediscovered passions I'd set aside. Painting, reading poetry, long hikes in nature, all things James had never valued. In moments of quiet reflection, I realized something profound. My marriage hadn't defined me, nor had James's betrayal destroyed me. Instead, it had been the catalyst for discovering who I truly was, who I'd always had the strength to become. I was not a victim, nor was I defined by someone else's choices. One crisp morning, sipping coffee at Café Lumiere, ironically, the very place James and Lauren's deception had first been revealed, I felt peace wash over me. My phone buzzed softly. A message from Sarah again. "How are you feeling today?" Smiling to myself, I typed simply, "Free?" Closing my eyes briefly, I felt the sunlight warm against my skin, aware of the quiet joy within me. The painful journey I'd traveled now felt distant, like an old story belonging to someone else. My future was uncertain, yet beautifully open defined solely by my own choices, guided by a strength I'd discovered within. At that moment, sipping my coffee, surrounded by strangers who knew nothing of my past, I finally understood what true freedom felt like. Life unfolded gently after the storm, filled with quiet joys and newfound strength. With each passing day, I reclaimed parts of myself I'd nearly forgotten. painting canvases in soft, vibrant colors, savoring lazy afternoons in sunlit cafes, reconnecting with the friends and passions I'd sacrificed years before. The wounds of betrayal faded into distant scars, reminders of my resilience rather than pain. Then, one chilly evening, nearly a year after our divorce, I opened my door to find James standing awkwardly on the porch. Time hadn't been kind to him. Lines of worry and regret etched deeply into his once confident face. His eyes met mine, pleading silently for forgiveness. "Kate," he began softly, voice shaking slightly. "I made a terrible mistake." I leaned calmly against the doorway, regarding him without warmth or bitterness. "I'm sure you did, but that isn't my concern anymore." "Please," he persisted, stepping forward hesitantly. "Lauren and it was never real. I was blind, selfish. You're the only person who's ever truly understood me. I'm begging you for another chance." A flicker of sadness passed through me, not for myself, but for the man who had lost everything chasing empty illusions. "James," I replied gently yet firmly, "you didn't just lose me by betraying our marriage. You lost me long before that, when you stopped seeing my worth." He flinched, visibly struck by the quiet truth of my words. "I understand now. I promise I'll change." I shook my head slowly, a calm finality settling in my heart. "I've changed too, James. But my change didn't come from empty promises. It came from learning my own value, without needing validation from anyone else. I'm happy now. Truly happy." He stood silently, realizing he'd arrived too late, finally grasping the weight of all he'd lost. "I wish you the best," I said sincerely, gently closing the door on my past, forever. As I returned inside, peace enveloped me. This moment wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was simply the natural closure I'd needed, the final affirmation of my growth. The woman who once measured herself through James's eyes no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and complete on her own. I curled up comfortably with a book, the soft glow from the reading lamp illuminating my quiet sanctuary. Smiling softly, I turned the page, not just of my book, but of my life, ready to embrace the unwritten chapters ahead. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.